Who's hosting?
I don't know. We didn't decide earlier. I'll host.
Okay, I feel like I've hosted twice.
Hello, and welcome to the last... Hello, and welcome. Okay, we're going to try this again.
Your favorite book podcast.
Thank you. I almost said your last book podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Your Favorite Book podcast. I'm Tanner.
I'm Mallory.
We're siblings.
And we like books.
And on today's episode,
we will be talking about NONA the Ninth,
which is the third book in the Locked Tomb trilogy by Tamsyn Muir and narrated by Moira Quirk,
Woo-hoo!
who are the two best people on planet Earth.
I would love to meet both of them.
Yeah. We loved this book so much.
It was so good.
She just did it again. I devoured this thing.
I sit astounded.
Yeah. I'm also seated and astounded.
Yeah, I feel like I don't even know what to say about it because I just enjoyed every aspect of it so thoroughly. And once again, disclaimer, if you have listened to any of the other episodes and you think, maybe I'll read that, read it. You should read it. You should read it before we talk about it because we will be spoiling some stuff and...
There's no way to avoid it.
Yes.
And the spoilers are so important.
Yeah.
Like, I never meant it for any book that I've ever read before.
Mm-hmm. And Tamsyn Muir reveals things so perfectly.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yes, we've talked about everything that we love about her writing style and her books so much. It's going to be hard to talk about, or not to go over those things again.
Yeah.
Obviously, I guess as a quick recap, her ability to establish a sense of mystery is unparalleled. Mm-hmm. Like, I still feel like I have so many unanswered questions from the second book. And then I started reading the third book and it's like, oh, it's an entirely brand new character. Uh-huh. At least it isn't written in, like, second person again. This is awesome. Hi, Roswell.
It's Noodle.
It's Noodle.
This dog does not have 6 legs, unlike one of the characters in this book, which is a 6-legged dog named Noodle.
He doesn't have boundaries.
No.
Unlike Noodle. We're going to cut that out. We've talked so much about Tamsyn Muir and everything that we love about her, like her writing style and her storytelling. Yeah. I guess just to quickly go over the things that are obviously in this book too. It's her sense of humor and her ability to establish a sense of mystery are unparalleled.
Yes, it's fantastic. She's so expertly weaves it together.
Yeah.
Like, I know you've talked about Brandon Sanderson's idea of, like, having great world building by making it appear a lot deeper than it actually is.
Yes.
And I think she does this very, very well in this as well.
Absolutely.
And that has to do with, like, her ability to make something seem mysterious and complete.
Yes.
Instead of mysterious and hollow, I guess. Yeah.
And I think it's because there are a few parts of the world building that you rely on as, like, rules that don't change. Mm-hmm. And in this series, it's the lictors.
Yeah.
It's all about becoming a lictor. How does that work? Mm-hmm. How do two souls become immortal together?
Yeah.
That's the tip of the iceberg. And then everything else beneath that, that's the stuff that she hints towards.
Yeah.
And gives you a sense of mystery that makes you, that compels you to keep reading more. Because it's like, what else could happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's good. And she also does a great job at slowly releasing more information about the mythos around being a lictor.
Yes. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger with each book.
Yeah.
Like, the first book is quite small.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's probably all there is.
Yes.
Because it felt like such a huge discovery for those characters to figure out how they become lictors.
Yes.
And then you keep reading and you're like, oh.
And I would like to amend my previous statement. The first book is not that small.
No,
but relative to the other books.
Yes.
It keeps expanding its world building.
Yeah.
In the first book, Gideon the Ninth, it's told from the perspective of Gideon, who is a cavalier to Hairbands the Ninth, who is her necromancer. And it is their quest to help Hairbands become a lictor.
Yeah.
And the grand reveal at the end of that book is that the only way that you can become a lictor is if your cavalier dies for you.
Yeah.
And your soul...
Like, gives their soul to the necromancer to use.
Yes. And in the second book, and that book takes place on one planet inside a castle. And we hear about, like, the emperor undying, their god, Hairbands and Nun. She's worshipped him her entire life.
Yes.
We hear about a locked tomb where, and Gideon well, I guess Harrowhark and Gideon believes it, but Harrowhark especially believes that if it's ever open, then the apocalypse will begin. And Harrowhark is in love with the lady who's inside the tomb, and she feels guilty for opening it. Like, all that stuff is the hollow iceberg stuff, right? But the tip of the iceberg for the first book is how do you become a lictor between Harrowhark and Gideon, and your foundation is the relationship between those two dynamic characters.
Yes. Fantastic.
Brilliant. It's great backstory, tons of conflict. A great love story. I love Gideon. It's so much fun to have your protagonist be your comic relief.
Yes.
And the second book takes place on a spaceship. Harrowhark is trying to become a lictor, but she's struggling with the trauma of losing Gideon from in the first book. Spoilers, like we've said, spoilers, but we're just going to recap this real quickly.
Yeah, and so to combat that grief, she basically gives herself a lobotomy to forget Gideon and rewrite all of her memories of what happened in the first book. Because
if you apparently don't remember who your Cavalier is, then you don't eat their soul.
Yeah, so she did that to prevent Gideon from being swallowed
as far as we understand
That's the guess.
Because one of the downsides you could say about Tamsyn Muir's work is that she's so good at establishing a sense of mystery that you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So I can see why people won't like it.
Yeah, I do
for that
too.
reason.
I love it, but
Me
I
too.
definitely see why that could turn people off from the series.
Yeah.
I have read so many subreddits about the Locked Tomb now that I've read all of it. Because
I
I'm
know.
I thought I understood this, but I saw someone and said, can you please explain Nona the Ninth to me as if I was a 5th grader?
Yeah, that's what I need. I need a lore master to write a Spark Notes companion novel to each of these books to explain to me what is going on behind the scenes. Yeah. But and I know I'm cutting you off track here.
Oh no, that was it.
Even though there is the hollow iceberg aspects of these stories, you can enjoy them for the things that you do understand.
Yeah.
And what she is so good at writing are characters that you care about. That is what you hold on to with dear life through this roller coaster of a book.
So fantastic.
Even if you don't understand, what the hell is a lictor and who is Nona and what happened to Harrowhark.
So much soul swapping that happens.
There is.
That you're okay, at one point, this person was...
But now they're a he and he's a she, and it is confusing to keep track of what character is who. Mm-hmm. It's even kind of confusing to keep track of who is inside Harrowhark's body.
Oh my gosh!
Because it changes.
Yes, and it even changes to where 25% of Gideon's body is in Harrowhark, and the other 75% is in zombie Gideon.
Yeah. And then at the end of the second book, that swaps. Yeah. Where it's okay, now Harrowhark's soul is gone. It's gone somewhere else. Okay, that's just the point of what we're trying to say is that it's confusing, right? Is confusing. It's tough to keep track. Mm-hmm. But somehow, I don't know how, it must be because she's writing such brilliant characters. Yeah. You are just enthralled by the primary narrative.
It's fantastic. The whole of Harrow the Ninth, I was hoping and waiting to get a reemergence of Gideon in some way or another.
Me too.
And then you get that in the last chapter.
And it's so amazing.
It's perfect.
It's she's back, she's alive. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
But then you're but wait, where's Harrow?
Mm-hmm. And we don't know. And that's the cliffhanger that it ends on. Yeah. Is that Gideon has returned to Harrowhark's body, and Gideon's pissed because she's I gave you my life to become a lictor.
You hated me so much you didn't even want it. You hated me so much you forgot me.
That's what she says.
That's what Gideon thinks.
But it's the opposite, obviously.
It's because Harrow loves her so much.
Yeah, that she didn't want Gideon to die for her, obviously. And there's so much backstory for these characters. Mm-hmm. Harrowhark, obviously, has struggled her entire life with being the aftermath of...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. The way that she was born, her parents wanted to create a great necromancer, so they killed 200 children to create her. Mm-hmm. And Gideon was one of the only children who survived that attack. Yeah. So that's where their relationship gets their start off on.
Yeah.
Which is obviously very rocky.
Yeah.
So at the end of book 1, I know this is just a recap of like the first 2 books, but it's important.
Okay. Yeah.
Gideon is sacrificing herself for Harrowhark, and Harrowhark can't deal with that.
Mm-mm.
So for me, the second book, starting off with Harrowhark and her trauma of losing someone, like her only friend, really.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah, the only one that's living.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That cares about her in their weird, screwed up way.
Yes.
Which makes their relationship so
that
interesting.
Much better too.
Yeah. I was not as huge of a fan of the second book as you were.
Mm-hmm.
I still loved it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I felt like it was lacking some specific motivation from Harrowhark.
Yeah.
The story was about the mystery of why did she have false memories, basically?
Yeah.
Why is this being told in second person? Why is it an unreliable narrator?
Mm-hmm.
And I also wasn't as enamored with the tone of the second book.
Yeah, it was very, very different than the first one.
Yeah. Well, I would say it was just lacking that comic relief.
Yeah.
It didn't have Gideon.
Mm-mm.
And Gideon is such an important counterpart to Harrowhark.
Yes, she's so dark and sad and morose and logical.
Mm-hmm.
There's no light there,
yes.
almost. And Gideon is such a great...
Contrast.
Yeah, you miss it. And it's very hopeless for most of the book. You're like, okay, she's still sad. She's still depressed. And
this
now
is hard
she
to
can't
read.
even remember her best friend.
I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
The third book, to me, felt like a return to the first one in that way.
Yeah.
But it was almost much brighter than the first one.
Yeah, I think it was a lot brighter than the first one.
Even though there are literal, like, apocalyptic things going on during it.
We get zombies in book 3.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Just as a quick aside to speak about the tone,
uh-huh.
There's a video game company, Blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
They make World of Warcraft. And I remember a long time ago hearing something about this when they were making Overwatch. But they found from their data that players in World of Warcraft wanted to spend time in lands that were bright and colorful and happy. As opposed to the dark and wretched, scary places. I know it's a personal taste thing, but in general, that was what their data showed. And I think you can draw a similar comparison to these books.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you asked me to reread this series, I would look forward to reading the first one and the third one the most. Simply because the second one feels so dark and depressing.
Yeah.
Even though I loved the character relationships.
Yeah.
I loved the Lictors. Mercy Moore and Augustine and God were interesting.
We get a lot of great
Gideon.
Yeah, and we get a lot of great backstory behind all those relationships, and it's fun. There's a lot of history there.
Yes, but it is more horror. It is more like internal trauma stuff. There's a lot of extremely fun and blasphemous scenes in that book. I know this isn't a review of the first 2 books. I'm sorry. We're getting to it.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
We're contextualizing the third one.
Yeah.
But for me, what I was missing was that lighter tone.
Yeah.
And also, them just being stuck on the ship felt claustrophobic to me. But that's why I didn't love it quite as much, even though like all of Tamsyn Muir's talent is on full display during that second book.
Yes.
I still think it's a good book.
Yeah.
But me, personally, I wanted something more like the first book where it was like, we can explore this cool, dark castle. It's overgrown. We're from Gideon's point of view. She's obviously sad, but she has this dark, twisted sense of humor, which is so delightful.
Yeah.
The third book takes place on a brand new planet. Never heard of before. I don't even know what the name of it is. I'm sure it's mentioned. It doesn't matter.
I don't think it is.
The point is, and it's told from the perspective of a brand new character named Nona.
Nona. Also, quick side note, the backstory of her name, I love it so much.
Yeah, we should go for that.
The first thing that Nona says when she wakes up in the body of Harrowhark.
She doesn't know that.
She doesn't know that. She is a completely sentient, different person that we haven't met before. And the first thing she says is, no, 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 no. And so they called her No, and then they called her No, and then that turned into Nona. And I just love that.
It's such a cute name.
It's so cute.
I love Nona.
It's so cute. And I mean, of course, there's probably a tie to the fact that it is Harrowhark Nona Jasmus.
Nona Jasmus.
Duh.
But it also kind of reminded me, and this is weird, and you never know with Tamsyn Muir, there could have been a very specific reason as to why Nona woke up shouting no. But it kind of reminded me of when Gideon's mother, Wake, was giving birth to Gideon, and she shouted, Gideon, Gideon, Gideon. I don't know if there's any sort of a connection there.
Yes.
But this book is so interpretive.
Yes.
When it comes to specific details like that you could probably make some sort of a connection.
Yeah.
But it feels like something purposeful.
Yeah. Can I also say something about that same kind of stretched out content? Thanks for listening today.
Okay, go ahead. Don't lose your train of thought.
In the prologue, we get this kind of poetic monologue kind of thing, and it ends with "I still love you," and it's supposed to me. I read that as Harrow speaking to Gideon.
Okay.
As she loses her consciousness. This is also a big spoiler, but in the epilogue, we get a character waking up, and the first word they say is "you."
I didn't catch that. That's so cool.
It's just small things like that you really do. Like we've been talking about this off the podcast too. You have to be a vigilant reader to read this book. And I think I love the audiobook, but you have to read it if you want to understand it. You completely lose a lot of stuff listening to the audiobook purely because it's a lot easier, at least for my mind to wander when I'm listening to the audiobook. I was about 50-50 on audiobook and reading. I didn't listen to the audiobook for this at all. I read the entire thing. Yeah, there was some stuff that I lost because I listened to it. And the audiobook narrator, best audiobook narrator in the world. Moira Quirk is fantastic. Perfect choice for this book. It's just more book to love. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's a good thing. It's not a downside. Yeah, but like it's hard to pick up everything. You miss on those tiny details like you just mentioned where it's like there is a really deliberate connection between the prologue and the epilogue, which is awesome. Also, I'll just say this. I have to credit her writing style yet again. How the hell does she do it? This is like an artist who can do like abstract stuff, photorealism, cartoons, animation. Like it's crazy. She just can do the spectrum. And her ability to switch styles so quickly and so clearly. Like some people try to switch styles and you can see the blurred lines in between them, but hers are completely separate and distinct. Yes. Like even just from book to book to book. But in this book we have some characters who have two souls in one body. And her ability to change characters is so amazing. It's amazing. It's incredible. Even the epilogue for me in the third book, when it's written in scripture and it reads like scripture, I was just blown away. It's incredible. I love that she can do that. Like she will be, I know, obviously we're seeing this through rose tinted glasses, right? Yes. But she will be regarded as one of the greatest sci-fi fantasy authors of her time. This book no doubt has made this into my very favorite series I've ever read. It's up there for me too. It's incredible. Yeah. So should we briefly go over the plot of this book? Yes. So this end of the second book, where does that leave us? So like we said, at the end of the second book, Gideon's soul is inhabiting Harrow's body, and Harrow's soul is in the river, which is this like second dimension, nebulous, it's time warp, loophole, whatever. It's sci-fi. Yeah, it's like purgatory. Yeah. It's an afterlife. Yeah. It's where souls go to die, and lictors can go inside the river. Yeah, and you have to go inside the river to fight the revenant beasts, which is kind of like the ticking clock element. Beasts. Resurrection beast, which is kind of like the ticking clock element for both the second book and the third book. Yeah, it's for the whole world, really. Yeah, and resurrection beasts are just trying to destroy humanity, basically. Yeah, and they're like they're just sniffing out big resources of energy and soul energy, and they're like. And they just get bigger and bigger. And so that's why lictors exist. I don't know why we're explaining all this. But this is explaining why Harrow Hark is not in her body. Yeah. And Gideon is. Yeah. And all of the lictors, because they're soul battery powered, the resurrection beasts are drawn to them like magnet. Yeah. And so Harrow and Gideon are both fighting similar things, just on different levels. Harrow is in this spirit realm speaking to all of her dead friends, which was very touching and just great. And Gideon is fighting heralds. Heralds. We don't have to explain all this. Whatever. So Harrow at the end of the second book does not choose to return to her body. And it is in
interpretive. Like we said.
Yes.
I had to reread the ending a couple of times.
Yeah, it's quite complex and not completely clear.
Yeah, she ends on a cliffhanger. Purposeful. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And
we don't really know specifically where Harrow Hark went at the end of the second book, but you get the feeling that she gave Gideon her body because Harrow Hark believes she doesn't deserve to live.
Yes.
And Gideon does.
Yeah.
And they both feel the same way about each other.
And so Harrow, her spirit, the way I interpreted it was she returned to that same locked tomb on the ninth house, which is where she opened the tomb to start the apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And she returns to that and stays with the body that is in the tomb.
Yes, I agree with you.
Okay, I think that's what happened. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
So, for the beginning of the third book, I assumed that we would begin with Gideon inside Harrow Hark's body, and it would be about Gideon trying to go back to the locked tomb to find Harrow Hark.
Yeah, that's what I assumed
her soul,
too.
Or something like that.
No, let's just tell you how this book starts. It starts off with a party invitation list of all of the dogs that Nona wants to invite to her birthday party.
To her half-birthday party.
Her half-birthday party.
Which is so great because in the previous books,
they have a list of the houses, their necromancers, and their cavaliers.
Dramatic personae. It's like the cast of characters.
Yeah. Drama, whatever. Yeah. And in this one, it's a list of dogs that Nona wants to invite to her birthday party.
Fantastic. It's perfect.
Yeah.
It gives you exactly the sense of who Nona is from the get-go.
It's the perfect establishment of that tone.
Yeah, which no one really knows who Nona is. That's the mystery of this book is...
Who is Nona?
Yeah, so Nona's living on this post-apocalyptic kind of world.
It's dystopian for sure.
Yeah, dystopian for sure. And she's living with Pyra.
Pyra. I call it Pyra because that's how Murdoch pronounces it. Yeah, Pyra DeVay.
Pyra DeVay, who is the spirit in the body of Gideon the First.
Yes, it gets a little confusing, but if you read the books, you know.
Yeah. And then Camilla Hecht, in conjunction with the spirit of Palamides, who they swap. Yeah, they swap who's in charge every now and then.
They're not really a lictor.
Yeah, but his soul is there.
Yeah. But only one of them can remain conscious, I guess, at a time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and they have it on a timer where it's like every however long.
Like 5 minutes maybe.
Yeah, and Pyra tells Camilla and Palamides that the more that they do this soul swapping thing, the more it destroys Camilla's soul.
Yeah.
So there's a cost to them being able to both be alive.
Yeah.
Because Palamides obviously died in the first book. And I loved those two characters, and I'm so glad that they came back.
Me too.
They're like my favorite.
I loved them in book 1. Just adored them, and I'm so happy. We even got to start seeing them in book 2 as well.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. And so it's those 3 people plus Nona all live in a super small apartment.
In a dangerous part of town.
In a very dangerous part of town. And it's
the world is ending.
Yeah, the world is pretty much over.
Yeah.
And it's Camilla, Palamides, and Pyra are basically trying to figure out who Nona is.
Yeah.
But they don't want to tell her who she could be because they're like, we don't want to lead the witness. Let's just let her experience life, see what comes out.
Grow to her own person.
Yeah.
And the reason why the world is ending is because the resurrection beast that killed Gideon the First, who was Pyra's necromancer, has followed them to this planet for some reason.
Yeah.
And they call this resurrection beast Varun the Eater.
And it's like this giant blue light in the sky.
I saw it as like a gigantic asteroid, like bigger than the moon. Like a planet.
That's kind of how I pictured it too. And that light is harmful to lictors. Necromancers, sorry, wrong word.
Yeah.
Necromancers, and so like...
It drives them crazy.
Yeah, it makes them go insane.
If you see it.
Yes.
And so necromancers have blinded themselves. Which is so cool.
So fun. I love that.
Isn't that such a fun little detail? It's such an
interesting... you didn't need to add that, but boy, is it great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so fantastic.
And on this planet, there is the Blood of Eden, who is like the rebellious faction against God and his empire. They've existed for I don't know how many thousands of years. Yeah. They have a proud history. And within the Blood of Eden, there are factions within factions. So there's not like one specific leader because that person, Wake, died at the end of the second book.
Yeah.
And they were their fearless leader.
Yeah.
And now there are different factions within the Blood of Eden fighting for control.
Yeah.
And everyone is trying to deal with Varun the Eater destroying this planet.
Yes. And there's zombies on the planet now, ? And there's a lot of like...
Well,
the people who live there are like necromancers are evil.
The normal
we
people.
Hate them. Yeah, the normal, regular human beings. No lictor, no necromancy, no nothing.
And they call necromancers zombies.
Yes, yes.
Even though necromancers can create zombies.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know what you mean by that.
Yes, yes. Thank you for clarifying.
But the normal people, they call necromancers zombies. And it's a derogatory term.
Yes.
And this is a cool part of the world building that we described early on in the episode that they expand upon in the third book, where it's like you get some different point of view on God, the Empire, and necromancers.
Yeah.
Like in the first two books, you assume, everyone just agrees to go along with God and the necromancers as like they are our immortal holy leaders.
Yeah,
and the Nine Houses, But they are royalty.
Yeah.
And in this book, we see more of like how the plebeian class perceives them. And I use the word plebeian because I've been reading the book Sun Eater. I know that's a derogatory term. And I can't remember. I think it's proletariat. How they see the royal class, right? Which is interesting.
Yeah. When I was first reading the first books, I was like, okay, so there's only 9 planets in this giant sci-fi solar system?
Yes.
Sci-fi solar system? Did I say that right?
Yeah, let's go with it.
Whatever.
Continue.
It doesn't matter. And I was kind of like, okay, that seems kind of small for the rest of the world building that's been here. So I was so happy to get to see, those are like the high upper class.
Yeah.
Nani, I can necromancy and you can't.
They're like the 1%.
Exactly. And so it was fun to see like, there's other desolate planets that have been completely forgotten and are all run down. I mean, not necessarily all of them are that way, but it was fun to get to see. Yeah, to get to see that other side of it and to get to see the opinions of the people who are like...
We don't like necromancers. Yeah. You're the reasons why Varun the Eater is here to destroy us. All that stuff was cool.
Yeah.
And Camilla / Palamides, they, at the end of the second book, apparently they were working with the Blood of Eden, and they went to the 6th house, which is where Camilla and Palamides come from, and they took them away from their planet, from their home, and brought them to this this planet that's on like the outskirts of the empire, I assume.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm speaking in such vague, non-specific terms is because basically all this stuff that we've just explained is trickle-fed to you throughout the book.
Yeah.
And it is so light and subtle, and they just give you little bits and pieces and hints of what's going on behind the scenes, like with the Blood of Eden. You would expect in a book like this for like the main character to be working alongside the Blood of Eden to make a deal with God and the Emperor or to fight against him.
Nope, Nona just has a crush on the Blood of Eden leader.
Yes. Does she? Well, she has a crush on Crown.
She has a crush on Crown.
She has a crush on anyone she thinks is beautiful. Yes. She even has a crush on Pash.
Yeah, she has a crush on everybody.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting thing where you're like, okay, all these epic, somewhat political stuff is happening in these first 2
totally
books.
Political stuff.
And then you get to this 3rd book, and you're like, our main character is a 6-month-old in the body of a 19-year-old.
And the plot is about her going to school.
Yeah, she works as a teacher's aide.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's brilliant. The story actually is about a kid living in a war-torn country. Really. I kept on thinking about like, okay, there's real world examples of this happening.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like kids living in this kids living in a war-torn part of the world. And that's what this story reads like. You don't care about like, a child wouldn't care about what countries are fighting who the Western class defines as terrorists, who the terrorists actually are, all that stuff. It wouldn't matter to them. And she does that perfectly here by making Nona feel like a child.
Yeah.
who doesn't care about like what Blood of Eden is doing. They don't care about lictors.
Yeah, she just wants to know if she got in with the cool kids.
Yeah.
It's so sweet.
And she just loves her family, right? That's all that she wants. Yeah. She just wants a normal life. She loves her life, even though it's horribly dangerous and scary.
But I mean, it's all she knows. Like, how is she supposed to be like, oh, I wish we didn't have lockdown drills every single day in school? She's like, oh, time for the next one. You know what I mean? Like, it's heartbreaking to look at that from our lens versus, it's like normalized for Nona's character and all of the children in the book,
Yeah, because that's the world that they know.
Yeah. Great commentary.
Yeah, and it feels real. And it's funny that we both complained about something from our rebellion stories in The Hunger Games and Red Rising, which is, I feel like the main character isn't actually doing anything to help the rebellion, right?
Yeah.
In Red Rising, I think you get something more typical from a rebellion story where it's like Luke Skywalker, right? Saves the day, destroys the Empire, he kills Darth Sidious. And in Red Rising, that's what Darrow does. He's the action hero.
Yeah.
In this book, this is a story about rebellion, but there is no action hero.
No, there isn't.
Isn't that
awesome? But it still works.
And
like,
it still
it's incredible.
Works.
It's incredible.
I think a typical story would go the Red Rising route. Yeah. Which is, it's a crowd pleaser, and I enjoyed it.
I did too.
But my God, is this not so much more interesting?
Perfect. It's fantastic. I don't even...
Like an author would be
I don't know how she does it.
I need to tell you a rip-roaring story, an action story, epic sci-fi battles. And if you want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you want to do something that's interesting and unique and compelling, then you've got to read this book.
Yeah.
Like, it is so different. Nona is not your action hero.
No.
It's a story about a kid who, oh God, what does she want? She wants to know who she is.
And she wants to just love the people around her openly. Like, that's all she wants.
And what's happening behind the scenes is the rebellion, and you don't care that you don't know what's going on at all.
No.
Like, we described that within Blood of Eden, there are factions within factions. All that stuff, I was like struggling to comprehend at first. Yeah. And then at a certain point, I just let go.
Yeah.
Because
it's interesting.
You don't need to know what those things are happening. You could figure it out.
Yeah, but you can still enjoy it completely without being like, oh, here's my notes on this person's in charge, this person's in charge.
Yeah.
I have no words.
I bet you could almost read this third book on its own without reading the first two.
I think you probably could.
You would feel frustrated. It would be frustrating. Yeah. Because you'd be like, what the hell is Varun the Eater? I don't understand who this Nuberius Ianthe prince is, or who Kiriona Gaia is, or, all that. I don't know who Pyra and Camilla are, but the way that she writes Nona and her family is so perfect. Yeah. It's fantastic. I think you could love this book without knowing any of the backstory stuff, without any of the Hollow Iceberg stuff.
Yeah, and this book somehow, with hard work from the author, but...
Yes, and an immense amount of talent.
Yes. It is such a bizarre thing to have the main character not know anything. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But you're still on board the whole time, and you're still like, okay, I can see why you wouldn't understand that. I don't have to either as the reader, because we're on the same page here. Yeah. Like, to have Nona wake up one day and be alive and be like, okay, I have to learn how to be a human, like, how do you do that? I don't know how she does it.
It's just her greatest skill, is writing characters that you love.
Yeah.
And care about.
It's incredible.
Doesn't matter who they are. That character dynamic between she, Camilla, and Pyra is so important. Yeah. It feels so good to read about.
It's just touching.
Yeah.
Like, and there's so many small moments in this book that really don't, like, completely push the plot forward or anything like that. But it's just so Most of this book is about Nona going to school. I mean, there's other stuff, obviously, that happens that are more important to the overarching narrative, where it's like, okay, Nona, she is aware that Camilla and Pyra are trying to help her find out who she is, and that she is inside the body of someone that she is not. Yes.
But they treat her like a 6-year-old because that's what she is.
Yeah.
She behaves and thinks and talks like a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
like most of what happens in this book is about her like wanting to help Camilla and Palamedes help her find out who she is.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And not because she has this like burning desire to find out who she is, like, oh, I need to find out who the person was that inhabited my body. That's not her goal for this book. She just loves Pyra and Camilla and Palamedes and is like, oh, you're trying to help me find out who I am?
Okay, I'll help you.
Sure, I love you guys.
That'll
like,
make you
parents.
happy? Okay, then let's do it.
Yes.
Like, it's fantastic.
And that bright character tone is what I was missing from the second book.
Yeah.
That is ever present in this one and just makes you fall in love with it.
It's so good. Like,
yeah.
Like, there's, like, small moments and it pushes the characterization so well. Like, Nona hates eating. She's not like food.
Yeah.
She hates eating. Her favorite food is erasers and pencils. Like,
which
she
I
does
love
not
so much.
Eat. But she
keeps
really
giving
loves,
kids her fruit.
Yeah, she trades all her food away at recess or whatever because she doesn't like it, and the kids around her do, and she's like, "This makes you happy. Here, have my fruit. I don't want it."
Yeah.
And there's this great moment when Camilla reads her stories at night. They have these old like letter to the editor newspapers, and she's like, "I want you to read those to me," and she's like, if you eat one piece of melon, you get one story. And she's like, okay, I'll eat 3 pieces of melon. That means 3 stories, Camilla.
Yeah.
And Camilla's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's just small stuff like that perfectly wrap up the family dynamic in a couple of sentences, you know? And it makes you fall in love with all of that much more.
Yeah.
She's just so precious.
Yeah. I love Nona's classroom and her classmates.
Yes.
A lot of this book takes place within this classroom.
Yeah.
And she's in charge of the tinies.
Yes. Yeah.
Helping them go to the bathroom and taking care of the teacher's dog, Noodle. Like, I can't believe how different this book is from the first two.
Oh, and she gets to use a whiteboard.
Yes. And she loves
the
that
whiteboard.
you can erase it with a rag.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, writing childlike characters, I've heard, is really difficult to do. Yeah. And I understand how you might read about Nona and feel like it's a little bit annoying because it's like, it's a 19-year-old who's pretending to be a child, but she's not. She is a child in mind and spirit and thought.
Yeah.
Mind and thought, they're two different things. No, they're not. And people are confused by that, like even her classmates.
Yeah. Because
this is like dystopian, war-torn world. The class is filled with like teeny tiny children.
It's like a daycare.
And like 16. It's basically a daycare. There's they have a teacher who teaches them science and math, but it's really like we just need a safe place for children to be at while the world ends around them.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just great.
Yeah.
You can see that happening. You know, like trying to find a safe haven to take your kids to during the day while you go work mining radioactive materials or building the newest war weapon plant.
Yeah.
You know?
But those things all happen in the background.
Yeah.
You don't see them.
No.
You are really just sucked into Nona's world. Like the most important things to her are her family and her friends. It's so adorable.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I can't believe that I loved like if you had pitched this book to me while I was in the midst of reading the first book, I'd be like, what?
No.
I'm going to read about like a 6-year-old going to school? That is stupid. I want to read about sword fighting and magic.
Yeah. And it's also interesting this book is like formatted pretty differently than the other ones.
Yeah, it is.
Where it's 5 days long and you get day 1, this happens, this happens, this happens, and then 5 or 6 chapters.
Yeah.
Day 2, this happens, this happens, this happens.
It's very Majora's Mask.
Yeah, yeah. And
which if you aren't aware, I'm sure you've seen Parker play.
Yeah, I've seen my husband play it. Yeah.
It's the same thing where it's like the game ends after the world ends in 5 days.
Yeah.
Right. So you play through those 5 days.
It's so interesting, and in between those, and every time Nona passes out or falls asleep, we get these flashbacks
They feel like flashbacks.
They feel like flashbacks to the original end of the world.
Yes.
And we see God.
John.
John, who we meet in the other books, and Harrow ?
Harrow / someone else?
Yes. ? And we see as God tells Harrow how the world ended. How he ended the world.
Yep. And it feels very dreamlike.
Yes.
But he is walking through the remains of
the
old
ruin and
Earth.
the destructions. And every time she wakes up, her day starts with her trying to tell Camilla about her dreams, which her dreams are what's happening in the tomb that Harrow's spirit actually is in.
We think, we don't know. It is so interpretive.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And those little morsels, that gives you such a sense of like this world is so much more interesting, complex, and deep than it actually is.
Yeah.
The tip of the iceberg is Nona going to school. And all of that backstory stuff with like John Lichter's what's happening with Varun the Eater and what's happening with Gideon's soul and Harrowhark's soul and Locked Tomb.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's just establishing a sense of tone.
No, it's like, okay.
But at the same time, there is a logic to it.
Yeah.
Right? And you're trying to piece those things together while the story is happening.
Yeah, and you as the reader have all the background information of books 1 and 2. Nona does not.
No.
Which is so fun. She's a walking character full of dramatic irony.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is.
It's incredible. Like there's a moment when Pyrrha is a redhead and Nona wakes up one day.
Pyra's a redhead?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because she's Gideon's body. Gideon is a redhead.
Okay.
It's like dark red, and she has red stubble.
Okay.
Anyway, one day, Nona wakes up and says, Camilla, what do you think is sexy? And Camilla's like, taking notes because everything Nona does, Camilla and Calamities take notes on, because they're trying to figure out if it's Gideon or Harrow or mixture or something else. And so they talk about that, and then Gideon says he finds redheads sexy. And Nona says, oh, I don't. And everybody was like,
that's weird.
Because Gideon was a redhead. I don't know.
Yeah, because Gideon's a redhead and she's vain.
Yeah.
But,
it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
I don't know why I brought that up. It was just to say.
No, there's so many brilliant small moments like that. The backstory stuff with John in Harrowhark, learning about how the world ended, the original Earth, and how necromancers came to be is equally as fascinating.
Yeah.
As Nona's story.
And it's interesting to see, like, if you put that story together, it's
I would have read
short.
that.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, maybe 10 chapters, 10 to 15 chapters.
Yeah.
And some of them are pretty short, too.
They are.
So, like, it's interesting to see how she packed all of that into 10 chapters. It's incredible.
I would have read a story all on its own, like a prequel told from John's perspective of how he became a necromancer.
Yeah.
Because it was so interesting.
It was fascinating. Oh, so
you just
good.
get everything you want in this book, unless what you want is like, oh, I want to know how Blood of Eden rebels against God.
You won't get that.
You won't get that here.
No.
And that's why I loved this so much.
It just was so different. Once again, like we talked about this, comparing book 1 to book 2. Different narrator, unreliable narrator, second person. Non-linear.
Yeah, it was so different.
Yeah, and
she does it again.
Again, completely different than both books 1 and 2. Yeah. I cannot wait to see what she does for book 4.
I have no idea what to expect. I haven't read anything else like this before.
I'm sad I can't read it again. For the first time. Sorry, I'm sad I can't read it for the first time. You're like, you can
read it again.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm not allowed to read this after this.
Never again.
Yeah.
So good.
Yes, we could talk about fan theory stuff, but I don't think that's nearly as interesting as talking about what actually happens in the book.
You can go on Reddit yourself and look up. Do you know they call him Jod on Reddit? God, because he's John and God. J-O-D. Jod.
Okay.
That's funny to me.
So at the end of this book, we said there are people who might not like this because we aren't getting like your Darrow Red Rising story.
Infiltrate the rebels or use the rebels to infiltrate the evil overseers.
Single-handedly overthrow the Empire.
Yeah.
At the end, we do get some sword fighting and magic.
Yes, we do. We get the third tantrum Nona has ever had.
Oh my god, just so painful.
Yeah. I also, can I quickly say...
and your heart just breaks for her.
I don't know if Tamsyn Muir was going for this, but as an autistic person, it was fascinating to read this book because I really resonated a lot with Nona she's given rules to follow to help her fit in and to be normal, because they're necromancers and they can't tell children at school they're necromancers. So
Camilla and Pyra give her strict rules to follow.
Yeah.
And they have code words and yeah.
And sometimes the other children don't follow those rules, and it sometimes makes Nona be like, oh, what do I do? Sometimes people don't follow the rules that I have set for myself socially, and that causes me to feel apprehension. And I feel like this is a very young-minded character, which sometimes you can see in people who have autism, like when I was young, I was told I was too old for my age, and now that I'm old, I'm told I'm too young for my age, or stuff like that. I really loved that and resonated with that. And
the fact that she's a picky eater.
Yes, really, yeah. And she's like, well, I don't want to eat because it's gross, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And we see her talk about how she's had 2 tantrums in her life, and they're very embarrassing for her, and she hated them, and she hulks out, basically.
Yeah.
And she's one of her core motivators is to not have a 3rd tantrum.
Yeah.
Like, something that they say a lot is, take a breath, take 5.
And she has to do that several times throughout the story when she feels like she can't control her emotions.
Yeah.
One sense of progress that we have in the story is that we do watch Nona grow up.
Yeah.
And she remarks several times about how, wow, 3 months ago, if this had happened to me, I would have had a tantrum. But I've grown up so much, and she's proud of that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Like, yes, level up.
Yes, and
it's so satisfying to read.
Yeah, and in the end arc, I guess,
climax.
Yeah, the climax. It starts with her getting shot in the head, and we haven't even mentioned that she has this abnormal capability to regenerate and heal at an astounding rate. She gets shot in the head.
Faster than a lictor's.
Yeah, she gets shot in the head and wakes up probably less than a minute later. And she's fine. But anyway, she gets captured and Pyra gets captured by Blood of Eden, which was a funny miscommunication? Doesn't matter. She gets locked up alone. And she wakes up and is so incredibly frustrated and angry that she's
tied to a chair and to like a radiator.
Yeah, so she's like handcuffed, basically. Yeah. And she has a huge meltdown tantrum in which she actually breaks...
gruesome.
It's gruesome.
It's body horror.
It's body horror again, and it's...
You could use your imagination.
Yeah, you can use your imagination
or just read it.
And she also punches her way through the wall, actually punches her way through the door. And she takes a piece of
She uses her
wood.
own body... to break the door open.
Yes.
Parts of her own body.
And because she can regenerate so quickly.
Yeah.
Whatever. And she takes a huge piece of wood and uses it as a two-hander, which Gideon uses two-handers, so question mark.
Yeah.
And she gets shot at multiple times and it does not. She keeps going and she's super, super upset and she's literally just screaming and screaming and screaming. And she even uses some word phrasing that was really interesting where she says, I'm screaming through the mask that is my face. Like, she's so far into her own body of being so upset.
Yeah.
Like, it's fantastically written, and as a person who has had autistic meltdowns before, I've never, I'm not saying I'm that crazy, but it was incredible to see that level of anger that I feel in my own self written out and displayed without being like poopy, bad, evil, crazy person.
Yeah.
It was just her instincts to try to get herself out of being locked up.
Yes, because she doesn't understand what's going on or what's happening to her, and she doesn't know how to regulate those emotions in a healthy way because she's just a child.
Yeah.
And because she's a lictor, basically a lictor plus, we don't really know what Nona is.
Yeah.
She can freak out and have a meltdown at that scale.
Yeah. And it scares all of Blood of Eden so much that they won't even be in the same room with her afterwards.
Yes. We won't get into how she ended up in that situation. You'll have to read about it. Like we said, most of this story really is about Nona discovering who she is.
I just really loved that. It was interesting and I felt seen. Not, I'm not like...
No, but you felt relatable, right?
It was incredible and I think it was really well done. And like I said, I don't know what Tamsyn Muir was going for there or what her personal experiences are, but I don't know. It was really cool.
Nona is a very believable character to me.
Yeah.
and so endearing and lovable. She just loves everyone.
Yeah.
And to see something happen to her like that was so unfair. To see people treat her like a monster when she isn't. Yeah. When all she needed was just Camilla or Pyra to sit down and talk to her and say, here's what's happening.
Yep.
Like a patient, gentle parent.
Yeah.
Instead, Blood of Eden overreacts. And it felt so unjust.
Yeah, it did.
And they're supposed to be the good guys as far as we understand. But it's very rare when you can feel that much vehemence towards a group of people or a character.
Yeah, it was incredible.
There's so many stories that I've read where it's like,
the evil bad guy, he kills your friends. And it feels, and it's because they want to rule the world.
Yeah.
It feels so flat and hollow. But here, your emotions feel so genuine towards all the characters.
It's fantastic. And like, after she calms down, she is able to sit with Camilla, and Camilla is still locked up, and she's not. And she's like, about to be like, get that off of Camilla. And Camilla's like, it's fine. We're fine.
Basically, from that point on, Nona says that she's been on like the edge for days. Yeah. No rest, like no time for her to recover from her autistic burnout.
Yeah,
basically,
exactly.
If we're going to stick with that metaphor.
Yeah.
And like horrible things just keep happening in the climax of the book. Like the world is ending. Varun the Eater, he starts to drop heralds, which are these horrible monsters established in the second book that start killing people.
Yeah.
And there's some strange, mysterious stuff with Nona. Like, she has weird powers that aren't associated normally with lictors that people can't explain.
And she even says to Calamities, she's like, I'm dying.
She can feel it.
Yeah.
And Calamities inspects her soul and can tell that she's giving off all this energy, and it's because her soul is trying to leave its body.
Yeah.
It's pretty confusing for me.
Yes. Yeah.
But basically, Nona, towards the end of this book, is comatose.
Yeah.
Not comatose, but she can't move her own body. She can't control it.
Yeah, she slowly loses her ability to walk, and, you know, she has to be carried around. And
Pyra's carrying her around everywhere. Ianthe comes back with Gideon. I don't know how much of this we can give away.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
You'll just have to read the book if you're at this point.
The ending is crazy.
The ending is insane.
Yeah.
Like we said, we do get more magic and swords.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible fight scene between Camilla and Ianthe. Ianthe herself has not, like, her body isn't on the planet, but her cavalier's body is. Yeah. Nibirius. And
she's
his
possessing
name,
him? Oh.
Yeah. I think he goes by he, him at this point. There's a lot of gender bending stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
But they refer to him as Prince Ianthe Nibirius. Because it's Ianthe's soul basically haunting
in Nibirius' body, which is her cavalier.
Yeah. We also find Gideon, but she's dead and not entirely herself.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting.
The Blood of Eden wants to use Gideon to open up the tomb. That's what we discover they've been fighting for basically this whole time.
And they talk about the key a couple times, and then you find out that Gideon's body is the key.
Yeah. The whole plan for Blood of Eden has been to kill God.
Yeah.
And that's why Gideon was created in the first place. Because only a part of God himself could open up the tomb.
Yeah.
And so they took some of his genetic material and combined it with weight. Yes, I was thinking another name. To create Gideon.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of rambling. No. But we're just explaining everything that happens behind the scenes that you don't get until like the very end.
It's crazy.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like rushed to me at all. It's really paced really well, and the fact that the whole book is on a timer and a countdown the whole time, of course you get, there's only one day left, you know?
Yeah, that sense of urgency.
Yeah.
The plot has to come to some sort of resolution. But normally in a book like this, you would expect, okay, the goal is to kill God.
Yeah.
The whole book would be about how Blood of Eden makes progress towards that goal.
But we don't get that.
Nope, it's not.
Isn't that incredible?
No,
and I loved this book.
And they don't even kill God at the end.
No.
You know?
Yes.
That'll be book 4, probably.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Who knows when it'll come out.
Yeah,
but I can't wait.
It's going to be great.
Is it going to be told from another perspective? A brand new character? Are Harold Hawke and Gideon never going to come back?
We do get Gideon calling an ancient immortal a big slut.
Which is so great.
Great, fantastic, love that.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
It's immaculate.
Yeah.
I have to say, I just loved it. I think I loved it more than the first book.
Really?
Yeah.
It was so well done.
Yeah.
So well done.
I think for me, well, obviously, I loved it so much, like on an emotional level, but so much of this, my love for this book comes from just how impressed I am by Tamsyn Muir's skill.
Yeah.
How audacious her decisions are.
And, you know, sometimes you see people try to write difficult things, and you're like, I can see that you tried. There's something to that. She did not just try. She perfected it.
I know.
It's incredible.
Yeah. It feels like the exact book that she wants to write.
Yeah. So...
it's unlike anything I've ever read. You have to give it a shot.
It's incredible.
Unless you're a God-fearing person.
Yes, that is true. That is very, very true.
Something that I feel like I always have to say for the second book, but I loved it so much.
I did too. Is this one of your favorite books?
Yeah. Oh my God. I can't wait to read it again.
I know, me too. And I can't wait for book 4. Tamsyn Muir, please take your time.
Yes, take as much time as you want. Take you the rest of your life. You don't have to write the next book. I will love all these 3 books for what they are.
I would love an arc. I would love to be a beta reader. Obviously, we loved your books. And if you're listening to this...
We don't deserve to be beta readers because we don't know what's going on.
If you are listening to this, Tamsyn Muir, I might poop my pants, actually.
I'm disowning you.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're no longer related.
I would take that if it meant Tamsyn Muir listened to our podcast.
Okay.
I'd take her listening to our podcast over being your sister.
Yeah. I never owned you as my sister. That's a weird term, disown.
It is weird.
Yeah. I guess one last thing I'll leave you with.
Okay.
Is this your favorite book?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely one of my favorite books.
Good.
Fantastic. Noodle for the win.
Yes. I would like to buy a cheeseburger shirt.
I do too.
That'd be cute.
It would be so cute.
Maybe in the next episode.
Yeah.
We'll wear them. Well, thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yes.
If you did enjoy, please subscribe. We put out an episode every week.
If you know who Nona is, please message us and help answer some questions.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, we don't know who she is.
I think I do, but I'm not even going to say, because I'm going to leave it up to your interpretation.
It's brilliant. It's one of a kind. I loved it so much.
It's so great.
Thank you for listening.
I can't wait for the Barbenheimer jokes in Electo the Ninth.
Those will be juicy. Explosive.